Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Mikey, Stafford here. I'm joined by Rory O'Connor and by Shane Dowling, and we are going to review the latest round of the Allianz Hurling League. Gentlemen, how are we?
Good, very good, Mikey.
Morning, Mikey.
Look, it's Valentine's Day, lads, and I would just like to profess my love for... I've got the wife, that's done, or that's boxed off, the kids obviously, I'd like to profess my love for Rory O'Connor. It's been platonic for a while, there's been a lot of promise there, that I thought we'd have a connection, and for one reason or other, we haven't really hit off until yesterday. Now, there was a connection yesterday, I have to say. He scored 1-4 against Clare, for those who don't know, and his brother chipped in with a bootload of frees as well. It's the O'Connor brother takeover. Wexford, like any county, Shane, they have you have the underage teams coming through, and there's great store put in them, and you expect them to hit the ground running as 20, 21-year-olds, and that doesn't always happen. But Jesus, when they come good, it just feels extra good when you've kind of been waiting a while for someone to kind of make a splash.
He's something else, Mikey. Rory O'Connor gave an unbelievable display yesterday. Some of his points he got, like the goal he got was I suppose it was power and pace that got him into the position, but some of the points he got as well. And let me add that I actually think Rory Hayes is a fine cornerback, and Brian Lohan didn't mince his words afterwards in commenting on Rory Hayes anyway. He was less than impressed, but he just happened to meet a Rory O'Connor that was really on form yesterday. But I actually think that he's an extremely underrated player. Now, I know if you were to ask a lot of people, they'd say that he's very good and whatever else, but the way I have to look at these things, if some of the higher profile players, if you want to call them that, did what he did yesterday, people would be shouting from the rooftops. He was really, really sharp yesterday, and I mean, if he can continue that form over the next, or bring it into the next couple of months, it'd be a huge bonus for Wexford.
Yeah, the frustration, I suppose, for a lot of people, Rory, not frustration, Davy Fitzgerald did a lot of good for Wexford, I'd be the first to say that. There was a slight kind of nagging feeling with some people that while they became very adept at the running game, and when it went right, it was very slick, but there was this idea that, Jesus, a few more long balls into the inside forward line that includes Conor McDonald and Rory O'Connor wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, and it seems to be an idea that Darragh Egan has struck on early enough.
I think you have to mix it up, though. I think all the best teams will not just have one way of playing. And I mean, Davy was in with us last night, and he would even concede it can't be just plan A and plan A all over again, because you become probably a bit too predictable for opposition teams. I mean, if you look at the best teams, the best team, Limerick, Limerick will bang one into Aaron Gillan. They'll drop it back. They'll work the ball. They'll play their little triangles if necessary. They've got runners if you need it. That's what makes them so difficult to figure out, because they can play it any which way you want. And I think, in fairness to Davy, he would understand that too. I think from Darragh Egan's perspective, I suppose, given the nature of the league now and the fact that we're heading into the real league, he's got opportunities in his first 2 matches to be able to experiment and to try and evolve their game a little bit. And he's got good personnel. I mean, I think if you were to do report cards, we're heading into a mid-season break now. Hurling takes next weekend off. And if you were to do a sort of a report card after the first part, I think Wexford's would be very much in a good balance, with a very good balance sheet. And they have obviously Limerick at home, Clare away, and to have 2 wins on the board, playing really good hurling. They've got a bit of depth to their panel. They look like they're in good shape. Obviously, they've got a bit of work done. Maybe they're a bit ahead of other teams at the minute. And again, as we know, different teams time their runs differently. But I think, he will definitely have eyes on Leinster, and it's going to be a really, really competitive province this year. And I think they are right at the forefront now in a lot of people's thinking, and no less because of the form of the likes of Rory O'Connor.
Yeah.
But Rory, sorry, just to go back on one thing you said there, and I think it was a theme of a lot of games throughout the weekend, is about mixing the short ball with the long ball. And I think Davy probably spoke nearly, I won't say too much about the short ball last night, but I think he was right, because I agree when you've guys like Rory O'Connor and Conor McDonald inside, you got to get the ball in, right? But there's no point in hitting a 90-yard ball from in front of your own 21 or just behind your own 45. And I think what Wexford and other teams have to do, and it's what Limerick do very, very well, is they get the ball, they spray it around until they get it, nearly to their own 65 at a minimum. And the ball they're hitting into McDonald and Rory O'Connor, these guys, is only a 40 or 50-yard flick into space. And that's where I think maybe at times when Davy was over, maybe they took a couple of too many passes and tried to run it too far forward. Whereas now I think they're getting the ball to the optimal position, if you want to call it that.
And getting it in fast.
And then delivering in. Like you see some of the ball Rory O'Connor got there yesterday. I mean, if Lord our God was marking him, he wouldn't have been able to do anything, because the space, and it was just a perfect ball delivered in. And I think actually Conor McDonald was probably small but starved yesterday, but Rory O'Connor saw the benefits. But yeah, I definitely think that's a massive thing. And I know we'll come on to Tipperary-Kilkenny in a while, but that's definitely a huge thing for teams, is they got to get the ball in around to the middle of the field, and the ball they're delivering in can really only be a 30 or 40-yard pass, more so than a long ball in.
Yeah. On the depth point then, Shane, I suppose you have the Wexford bench, I would say, is something that has let them down in the last couple of years in comparison to, actually Kilkenny would be a bad example at the moment, because perhaps they're not at their strongest in terms of their squad depth, but Galway, certainly Limerick, Cork as well, kind of, larger squads where Wexford didn't have that. But now, as you say, they've a decent panel now, and if Sean Murphy comes back from back surgery, Leach In's not too far away, and Kevin Foley, believe, is not too far away. Like, it seems an odd thing to say this year of all years that, Wexford are probably a few weeks ahead and maybe they're targeting the league. The championship starts a week after the league. Targeting the league is the same thing as targeting the championship.
9 weeks from yesterday, Cork play Limerick in the championship.
So there's no harm.
And Mikey, just one thing you said there about having strength and depth, like over the last 2 years, remember what you had is basically you had teams that maybe with 15 minutes to go or 20 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go, whatever it was, they had to unleash their bench and try to come in and finish a game. That's actually not going to be the problem this year. The problem teams are going to face this year is that they're going to play numerous amount of games where they haven't done in the last 2 years. So if you're only 1 or 2 injuries away from having to have not even a strong panel to come in off the bench, but you're going to have to rotate your team probably a lot of days because of tiredness and injuries and everything else. So that's where it's going to pay huge dividends to the team that's got the 20 or 22 players that are in a really strong position this year.
Yeah, that's interesting. Then that you cannot be reliant on 15 in February to be carrying you through the summer. All right. On that point, I suppose then, Rory, it was a better performance by Clare. Reading Anthony Daly's column this morning, Examiner, there was a lot to be happy about. But as Dalo said, probably the high point for Clare fans was the pre-warm up when Tony Kelly was out doing sprints in the rain. To have him close to coming back is huge for Clare.
And they have a few others. I mean, I don't think David Mack played yesterday.
No, he's still out as well, yeah.
And and Aidan McCarthy, who I think was a massive player for them in 2021, obviously a nominee for Young Hurler of the Year, and gives them a lot of energy in that half forward line and gets through a huge amount of work. I think he's going to be he'll be a big boost when he gets back as well. So they have a few players to come back in. Lost by 3. Unfortunately for Offaly, that's where they're going next. They'll have a week off really to sort of, recharge a little bit and take stock. And then they're heading to Burr, or is it O'Connor Park? It's up to Offaly anyway.
So O'Connor Park, I think.
It's O'Connor Park. Look, with all due respect, they're going to win that before they welcome the All-Ireland champions to Ennis the following week. And I think that's not a bad couple of weeks to map out the rest of your league campaign. You'll probably get a warm-up game at home, and then you're going to get a severe test because obviously, look, the reality is Clare play Limerick in Tiddlywinks. There's probably going to be 15,000 people at it, and that'll be a really good test then ahead of championship. I think from Brian Lohan's perspective, all he's got to do really is, just like Shane just said, it is like for all teams, well, certainly for the teams, we'll say in the mid-rankings, it's just putting depth into that panel, because whether it's suspensions, whether it's injuries, whether it's COVID, whether it's tiredness, fatigue, you are going to need numbers 20, 21, 22. It's going to be hugely important because the games at championship pace are going to be coming thick and fast once the ball is thrown in on the 16th of April.
Yeah. Well, we'll stick with that with the Group A for a second, Shane. We'll just briefly mention the Cork and Offaly game because we spoke last week about poor Offaly probably, a year of learning being a euphemistic way of saying they're probably in for 4 or 5 hidings. They got a mother of all hidings from a Cork team who you could argue didn't completely click by any means. One interesting point about the Cork team, I suppose, was Mark Keane playing on the edge of the square. He wouldn't be what you'd call your stereotypical Cork forward these days. He's a big man. He's a target man. He scored 1 point himself, but I suppose he was probably put in there more to create than to score anyway. Maybe?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think you're right. Are we going to go into too much detail about what happened just in terms of the game? No, there's no point, right? And it is going to be a huge learning curve for Offaly and whatever else, right? In relation to Mark Keane, I think it's great for Cork. Now, Rory, you'll know a lot more than I will hear in relation to Cork and everything goes with it.
He played out he played kind of number 12 yesterday as a sort of a puck out option, and he's 6'5". He's a weapon, Shane.
I know, and I saw him, and he's quick, and he's powerful, and he's got all the attributes. What I meant there is in terms of Cork hurling and what Cork did last year essentially is not going to be enough, right? Because it was there playing for everyone to see. So they got to try something else. They got to try vary it. And having someone like him that can cause trouble in at the edge of the square, that can be a puck out option. What I thought Cork, and they're very, very quick. What I thought they had to do a lot of the time last year for their own puck outs is they had to do so much movement and try to find themselves in space because they just weren't strong enough to win one-on-one ball down on top of 50-50 contest because it's just the players to have. Whereas now you could say to Mark Keane, right, you go to 10, you go to 12. There's no need for all this movement. Back to the old days nearly, right? 50-50, and he's strong enough and powerful enough to try win the ball and then to create something out of it. And of course you can try that then with mixing a match and that with 14, putting them inside and full forward. And again, obviously they've got a lot of quick players, they can get in quality ball, but when they're in trouble or when they're under pressure, having an option to hit that long ball in the edge of the square, I think it's huge for Cork, and I think it's is a find the right word, I don't know, but it's a huge asset to their team. And in fairness, Kieran Kingston, I know Cork did very, very well against Clare and wiped Offaly yesterday, and you see games over the years where teams are expected to wipe these lesser teams, if you want to call them, and they don't do it. And generally for me that's a sign of that they mightn't be going as well as you may think, whereas things seem to be tipping away nicely in Cork, and having the likes of Mark Keane there now as well, I think is a massive bonus for them.
Yeah. Rory, it was probably a bit of a not a shock, but it was a nice pleasant surprise that he chose the hurlers over the footballers, given his background as AFL, but it seems his first love is hurling, and in fairness in Cork, if you're an inter-county, if you're a dual star, it's usually the code people stump for if they have the option.
Well, I mean, he scored a goal in a football sense that probably should have gone into folklore had they actually gone on and won the Munster Championship afterwards, which the footballers didn't. And I think people were genuinely surprised that he firstly that he chose hurling, and secondly that the management would have felt that his hurling would be of sufficient standard that he would be able to get in at inter-county level, given the fact that, I mean, look, Shane will obviously know a hell of a lot more about hurling sharpness and the kind of sharpness that you need to your game to play at inter-county level, particularly, which I wouldn't have the first clue of. But if you're away in Australia for 3 years, the hurley out of your hand, can you make that adaptation very, very quickly? I don't know, is the honest answer. I think what we saw yesterday was a little, there's a kind of a roughness, I suppose, or a rawness still, which I'm sure, as a fella said to me, he probably needs to live in the ball alley for the next 2 or 3 months and try and get that kind of sharpness into his game. And then who knows? But I think it was a surprise that he did. And I think he would have obviously been a big boost to the footballers as well. I think just in a general sense though, and look, I'm not the only other thing that I suppose that came out that was slightly noteworthy, and this might seem like sacrilege, but is the day coming when Patrick Horgan may not start? I'm just throwing that out there. It could, You know, like obviously he's, you know, they're going to be minding Patrick of, you know, he's not getting any younger. But I thought it was interesting yesterday when he did come on that Shane Kingston remained on the freeze. That's normally Patrick's obviously major forte, and is an impact role. Maybe something that the management might feel that if you reduce the minutes, that you might get an extra 2 or 3 years out of him. You know, I don't know.
And sorry, just to go back one second, Rory, what you said is him being away, Mark Keane being away for 3 years. Like, I would think that if you're away for 3 years, trying to come back into intercounty hurling this day and age is more or less impossible, right? I actually didn't think his hurling lacked the whole pile yesterday. I'm not saying he's going to score you 2-4 from play every day he goes out, but I suppose what he, do you know who he reminded me of a good bit was the Bonner Maher. Like, so he's strong, powerful, quick, able to hurl without being naturally talented, I suppose, if that's the right way of saying it. And he was I just thought the comparison in my own mind was very, very similar. So I think that the way his hurling is at, and you give another 2 months of that under his belt before the championship starts, I don't think his hurling is going to let him down. No, if he finds himself 6 yards out on his own to take a shot, maybe that will tell. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him. But so I just thought that, you know, himself and the Bonner were very similar. In relation to what you're saying about Patrick Horgan, I think he'll start. Like, you know, I know the easy thing here would be to look at his age. I never look at anybody's age. I look at their physique, their physicality, their quickness and everything else. And again, I haven't seen much from, none of us have seen much from this year, but I think until we see him start from the game and where he's at, it's only then you can probably make a judgment.
Yeah, you're more mileage on the clock than year registration kind of guy, Shane, are you?
Exactly.
The final game in Group A then was the Saturday night game on television, where Galway went down to the Gaelic ground, Shane, and ruined Limerick's homecoming night. And you must have had high hopes with the start they had after being hooked early against Wexford, and, you know, people saying that's just to kick up the arse Aaron Gillan needed. Maybe it was because he scored the most archetypal Aaron Gillan goal you could possibly see. Diagonal ball to the outside, catches it, turns, wallop. It was a great goal and a great start.
Yeah, super start. Like I said before the game, and I'd still say kind of now, that maybe, you know, they're a couple of weeks behind other teams for reasons, you know, being away and everything else. And then that question was posed to John after the game, and he said, "No, we're back training 7 weeks. That's not an excuse." So if John's not using it as an excuse, I most certainly can't anyway. I think, you know, to be fair to Galway, there was one clip that I suppose epitomised for me where Galway are at. Towards the end of the game, now maybe the game was over at this stage as well, Sean Finn was coming out with the ball. Now, how many times do we see Sean Finn starting the play from back there, transitioning through the lines and then building it from there? 3 Galway players turned him over before another came in, and Joseph Cooney eventually got the ball and put it over the bar. And I just thought to myself that, you know, I thought in Shane O'Neill's first year with Galway, they were the closest team to beat Limerick. I thought they were very, very good. Didn't work last year, and obviously Henry coming in this year would give anyone a boost. So I was impressed by Galway. Going back to Limerick, I thought that, you know, William O'Donoghue getting injured at the start of the game, all of a sudden everything you want to try go after, I suppose, changes a small bit. So that definitely changed the dynamic. In saying that, they still had 11 of the starting team that won the All-Ireland out. I know they were missing still a couple of players. But for me, I think it'll bode well for Limerick. I'm far from concerned anyway. And I know it's funny because back in 2018, everyone wanted to see Limerick win All-Ireland, or, you know, when they got that far. And what I mean by that is when a team is starved of success for so long, everyone likes to see the underdog. Be kind of similar to Waterford now, for, you know, everyone would love to see a Waterford win it because they haven't won it so long. Now everybody wants Limerick to lose. It's just the nature of the way we are. And when Limerick lose, it kind of gives other teams hope, and they will be looking in, and they will be certainly tuning in to see what Dara Egan did, to see what Henry Shefflin did. But I think, you know, come championship time, you'll see a different animal. I still firmly believe that Limerick aren't as far in front as people think they are. So it's great for the neutral person looking in to see Limerick being beaten, as it kind of nearly brings them closer to the pack. But I still saw snippets on Saturday night of what they'd done last year that won them the All-Ireland, i.e. that Aaron Gillan goal that, we've seen so many times over the years. So, and, it was great to see Cathal O'Neill as well.
Oh, yeah.
I play well. I the talk about him over the last couple of years, I felt is hard on him because he's very, very young and played against Wexford. It didn't go far, but, on a personal note, just to see him going in and giving that performance was very, very pleasing to see.
I wouldn't say, Shane, Limerick could quite reach the level of being kind of... we were talking about how you no interest in American football. I was going to use a Dallas Cowboys reference. There's the team everybody loves to hate. I don't think you're quite there yet, but
no, I wouldn't agree with that either. I actually think like the one thing I would say on that is it just like this is the Limerick era. I think that's to be welcomed. You have to remember, like, she's been 10 years of Kilkenny domination. Tipperary dominated the 60s. Cork probably had their periods of domination in the 70s. There's absolutely nothing wrong when a team gets into a period where they win a batch of All-Irelands and carve out their own piece of history into hurling. And I think this is Limerick's time. And that to me is a good thing. It's good for her. It's good for the game. And it's just up to everybody else to try and, to get up there and I wouldn't necessarily see it as a bad thing.
I guess the any animosity might be coming from instance like the sending off, Shane, and your column in the past has dealt with accusations of Limerick excessive aggression, shall we say. You couldn't have any complaints about the red card, though. What Gearóid did, it's not acceptable, is it? And it was a fairly obvious red card.
No complaints, Mikey, and anybody that thought it wasn't a red card, and there was some. It was surprising, to be honest.
You wouldn't want to beat them down the dark alley.
Yeah, but it was the same with the Peter Casey incident last year. And while I'm obviously still very close to a lot of them, I'm not going to say something was not a red card if it was a blatant red card. I'm sure, John will know that, Gearóid will know that. And it was just, I'd imagine, and what people don't see, I suppose, off the ball is the treatment that he and probably the other forward gets. And at times, they're human beings, they lash out. And yes, I know Don Logue went to town and more or less explained all the number of previous non-red cards that maybe should have been dished out. But listen, it's part of the game, and it just so happened that because of maybe a number of things in the past, it was highlighted more on Saturday night. But listen, it was a red card. That's the bottom line. And I think it was Derek said it last night that I actually think that this would be the best thing to happen him and indeed Limerick, because I'd rather it happen now than happen in the middle of the summer anyway.
It was good refereeing as well, to be honest.
It was brilliant refereeing because no drama. Fergal, and that's
drama.
Didn't make it about himself.
Yeah.
There's your red card. Off you go. Get on with the game. End of.
And he got close enough to the action to nearly get a couple of scalps himself. Actually, he was right in there, so he had a good eye on it. I know you disagree, Shane, but there is a view out there that Limerick can be a bit loose, particularly in kind of flicking back with the hurl.
I don't disagree, Mikey. I've seen the incidents myself. The one thing I'd love to always try and be is realistic in your comments or in your approach and what you see. And I've never said anything other than what the main have said in relation to Limerick. Yes, there have been incidents over the last couple of years where they could have had more sending offs. That's reality. That's the bottom line. And sure, there's no hiding behind that. But people then go on about the edge. But sure, what's the edge like? Oh, Limerick living the edge like. Can anyone explain to me what the edge is like? Do you know what I mean? So people say Kilkenny did it. In their.
It's usually a good thing, Shane, because you talk about that Kilkenny team. Everybody always said they were on the edge. So seemingly being on the edge is a good thing. It helps win hurling matches.
Whatever it means, but. When Kilkenny were in their pomp, sure, everyone wanted to debate him. So what happens when you play the team that's always winning? You were a bit more aggressive in the tackle. If a chance for a row broke out, you were definitely going to take it on. And players get frustrated. And that's the reason why. I wouldn't see anything wrong with it, to be honest. But yes, there have been instances in the past, and I'm sure they'll learn with it now and just move on.
Yeah, it was, Rory. It was a decent game. The sending off probably did kind of spoil it a little bit.
Yeah. You could say that, that's not the ref's fault, or certainly Galway's fault.
No, I just mean that it's hard to truly take stock of the second half.
To my mind, for a league game on the 12th of February, I thought it was thunderous stuff altogether. I mean, just the way they both got stuck into it. One thing that stood out for me, actually, I thought was quite interesting. It'd be funny to get Shane's view on this. Fintan Burke, who, in fairness, had a blinder, in his interview afterwards when he was picking up the Man of the Match award, he said, you know, when he was asked about Henry Shefflin's influence, he said, well, Henry's come in, you know, doesn't worry about stats, just wants us to go out and hurl, and sure, that's what we want.
Do you believe that, Rory?
No, not at all.
Because if you did, I was going to get off the call.
Yeah, because it was really, because what I thought was very funny was, if anybody believes that Henry Shefflin isn't, you know, checking readouts, looking to make sure who's fading, who's you know, who's pushing on with their beep tests, and who's who, you know, what if he's looking at their shots percentages and their success ratios and their puck out stats, and if Henry's,
if they haven't made a homemade gym out of sacks of coal in the garage, they'll be in trouble too.
Henry Shefflin is a winner. Anything that aids and abets him in winning, Henry will be very open-minded towards. And while he may not be shoving it down their throats, you can be damn sure Henry is keeping a close eye on any numbers that are presented to him. Yeah. But I just thought that was really funny.
Well, he's been away with Thomas's, hasn't he? So maybe he hasn't actually had it inflicted on him yet, but he will. Shane, if you were to look at the stats, which I haven't, but if you were, I would say the tackle count, just the sheer like the kilometers covered by that Galway team, it was an impressive kind of display of, I suppose, intensity for, you know, early February.
It was unbelievable. It was like, you know,
it's a great game.
So okay, so there was a few mistakes along the way. You'd expect that, but in relation to the effort that was put in by both teams there, like it was just class. Like, you know, there's no two ways about it. And maybe Galway have realised that you know, that's what it's going to take to beat the Limerick team. And you know, it was funny, for whatever reason, when the full-time whistle is blown, my eye always just gets drawn to the managers just afterwards. I don't know why, it's just something. And usually, anytime I've seen John do it, like he, you know, shake hands and pat in the back and do a quick smile and off he goes. There was none of that the weekend. So I know Gearóid Canning said that there was a few words off the camera. So I don't know what happened, or maybe probably me overreading the situation. But there's a part of me thinks that maybe both know that they're coming for each other down the road, and you know, one believes that we can turn you over, and the other knows that they're a threat. So maybe that was the reason why. I don't know.
Henry was probably already looking at his stats readout. He just didn't even realize John was even there. He was just walking out. Anyway, look, it does bode well for the championship, because I think for the last few years, Limerick Galway meetings have kind of been what we've kind of been looking forward to, because we think there are two teams that kind of bring the best out of each other. Two other teams who have over the last long time brought the best out of each other were Tipperary and Kilkenny, and while they're probably not quite hitting the same heights of a few years ago, I think there was probably a lot to encourage both teams here, Rory. Obviously Kilkenny waiting to get their Ballyhale contingent back, which isn't like a magic wand or anything, but you know, it's significant. You know, two of their most influential forwards for a start anyway, in TJ Reid and Owen Cody, and whoever else is coming back. And Tipp, after Colin Bonner, we've discussed already, he's had a pig of a start, or he had, you know, the Kerry, the retirements, etc. They got a win. Jason Ford looks like one of the best forwards in the country, and Ronan Maher will not be left on the bench again, I imagine.
He's trying, again, another manager that's probably trying to evolve them a little bit and trying to put a bit of depth into the panel. He's also probably trying to get a small bit more pace into the team, particularly into the half back line. You're also trying to replace the likes of Brendan Maher and Paddy Maher, just in terms of leadership presence, you know, and just like, I mean, 10 years or however many years that they've given service to Tipperary, that's not easily done. And I think they'll be happy enough. One like, I mean, it was a funny match in that Kilkenny were very poor in the first half and conceded the most bizarrest goal. I mean, like, look, the two best goalkeepers in the country, Nicky Quaid and Scruff, and for him to get rumbled on a puck out, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
No, I actually I hadn't seen the teams named. I came in like a few minutes into the match, and I actually assumed it was the guy who was playing last week. I just didn't think Owen Murphy could do that.
Yeah, you know, it was
so unusual.
It was that was a first, and they were very poor in that first half. Now, they were playing into the wind. Obviously, they came out in the second half. I'd say they got an earful, and they certainly upped it. They made a few switches. Walter came on, made a big difference just in terms of a presence again. a lot of people I see this morning, Eamon Sweeney, writing the epitaph of Kilkenny hurling and basically saying that Henry was the one that maybe the one that got away.
Because Henry's gone forever.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the interesting aspects is, I mean, look, Kilkenny won't be in the hot shakes to win the All-Ireland this year, I would imagine. But and if they weren't to do so, you're heading into 8 years now since they'll have won Liam McCarthy. Now, I think at this point, what is interesting is Brian Cody's career, which was adorned with just prolific success and championship after championship for the first half of his career now, is drifting in. Like, there are now becoming almost two halves to Brian Cody's career, because we're drifting into territory that long since they've actually been All-Ireland champions. And I think it's going to be very interesting in terms of how his legacy is painted. And maybe will the murmurings and the grumblings in Kilkenny start to grow louder in that, is there a sense now starting to gather pace that, is he staying on too long, and will those concerns start to manifest itself from a Kilkenny perspective? Because I think, like yesterday, they huffed and puffed. I don't necessarily see them scaring too many teams, even in Leinster, anymore.
What do you think, Shane? It's
for me, Mikey,
it's a kind of in transition excuse. It might be wearing out, but at the same time, we all know that no empire lasts forever, and teams do need to be rebuilt. And he was so successful at it for 20 years that it's hard to say, is the fault with him, or could you blame Ballyhale's dominance of the Kilkenny Championship, or is it just a cyclical thing?
Well, for me, Mikey, it was one of the worst games of hurling I have seen in a long time. That may be an unpopular opinion, but if you saw some of the scores and shots that players got off yesterday, if I put it this way, if it was a training match and I was over either them, if it was a training match and them 30 players were from the one place, I would be pulling them in after 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes. Like the space. You look at the Limerick and Galway, right? You talk about teams in transition, okay? But you look at Limerick and Galway, how much of that match, was down to quality players, or was down to great hurling players, whatever. Yeah, bits of it were, but a huge amount of it was down to effort and work rate and tackles and hits and intensity. There was none of that in the Tipperary and Kilkenny game, in my opinion. Anyway, I'd be interested in what you think now. But like, Jason Ford was exceptional. He's a really good hurler, but like, I'm not being smart, but if you're an inter-county player and you get that space, you should be putting the ball over the bar. I just thought that the quality on show from more so Kilkenny was really poor. I thought actually Kilkenny would win the game. I still think they should have won the game when you look at the couple of mistakes that were made. I just think that both teams are a long, long way off what's going to be required to win All-Ireland. I could be eating humble pie, but I was very disappointed in what I saw yesterday. I just thought it was like a very, very poor training match.
What you make of Padraig Walsh being played centre forward, Shane?
I don't see an issue with it. I think he's a gifted hurler. I love, if you look at Kilkenny, you look at Hugh Lawler, Paddy Deegan, Paddy Walsh. I think they're actually really, really good hurlers. I wouldn't see an issue with Paddy Walsh playing at 11. I think because he started his career off in the half back line, he's a famed brother who was one of the greatest back there as well. I wouldn't see a big issue with that. I'd have a lot more concern than just having Paddy Walsh centre forward. I mean, how many times yesterday did someone come back to what we said in relation to the Clare Wexford game? How many times did somebody get a ball in around their own 21 or 45, fire it down the other end of the field to 2 or 3 opposition players in space? I don't get what that's about. Our team's not being coaching out to try and maintain the ball. I get when you've new players coming in, it takes a bit of time. I know it's only the second round of the league, but still, though, in terms of quality and in terms of how to play the game, I thought Tipperary were a lot better. I thought they tried to work the short game a lot more. I think it was Davey showed it again last night. There were snippets of it. There was also snippets of them hitting the long ball as well. So maybe they're trying to do the right thing. But in the main, I just didn't see much.
So I started off by asking a question about Brian Cody, which I think you've indirectly answered. You don't see a particular tactical master plan or kind of a coaching system there when you look at Kilkenny yesterday, at least, caveat it's the second round of the league.
I think it's very ignorant out of anybody to say that there's no coaching system in place, because these teams have very, very good quality coaches in with them. They're inter-county teams who have aspirations in their own camps of trying to win All-Ireland or win a provincial championship. So to say, and I hear some people saying that there's no coaching structure, it has to be not true unless there's a really, really bad setup within a county. But I just struggled to see what they were doing. At least with Tipperary, I saw that they were trying to, at times, work the ball through the lines, get it to the optimum position and deliver. But that failed at times, and maybe it failed when they became under a bit of pressure. But sorry, going back to Tipperary with Kilkenny. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't see it. That's the bottom line. And like, even there was one point Paddy Walsh got, if you remember, it came from a big 80-yard ball in. He touched down, in fairness, got a great score off his right. But I mean, how many times does that happen in a game? Not that often anymore. Yeah.
Okay, we'll finish up now in a second, lads. We'll just switch briefly from intercounty to the club, because it would be remiss of us, Rory, not to mention what happened in Croke Park on Saturday. 2 club finals to remember with unforgettable finishes. But
the football was utterly forgettable, bar the finish.
But the hurling was good. But
what a terrible match that was.
That goal, there was just so much about it that was just, the ball should have been lost on their own 65, and the midfielder somehow dropped it, was tackled, somehow came away, not just with the ball but in his hand and moving in the right direction. Perfect run. But like, who in their right mind would put €1 on Harry Ruddle to score a goal when he collects the ball on the Ballyhale 65-yard line?
It was absolutely incredible finish. It was like, it was funny. I think, was it Barry Coughlin in his acceptance speech? It said he'd been doing that to teams for years, and there was kind of almost like a sort of an awkward sort of groan which met that. But it was a very pertinent point at the same time, in that, like, even going back to last year's All-Ireland semi-final, Cork had Kilkenny, I would thought probably well beaten, and somehow last puck of the ball managed to, was it Adrian Mullen manages to get it into extra time. And this is class. It's just the way Kilkenny teams are programmed. They'll never give up, in fairness. Their spirit and their ability to just stick it in there. And for it to sort of have a kind of completely spun on its head, and to see a Waterford club actually win the All-Ireland, for a Waterford club to win the All-Ireland club for the very first time, I think that's an incredible achievement in and of itself. And it shouldn't be underestimated. I mean, we had Shane's club, by my reckoning, on just off the top of my head, you're still the only Limerick club that has done it, Shane. Isn't that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Which will give you an indication of how difficult it is. Like, you were the first Limerick club to do so in 2016. So, like, the boost that, like, so 2016, the Piercing win the All-Ireland club, that's a shot in the arm for any county, whether, and then 2 years later, Limerick win the All-Ireland. Is that a coincidence? Probably. But maybe it's not. And who's to say that what Ballystunner have done, might not give Waterford hurling a similar type of impetus, and you'd hope that it does.
It's weird, isn't it, Shane? Like, it's not just Limerick. Buffers Alley are the only Wexford club to ever win it. Coola are the only Dublin team to ever win it, albeit they won it twice.
It's a hard thing to win.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to win.
Burr are the only Offaly team to win it. Granted, they won it 4. Like it is dominated by Galway, Kilkenny and Cork clubs. So if this Ballygunner team had, kind of gone to seed without winning an All-Ireland Cup title, I think there would have been people all over the country scratching their heads. And certainly all the clubs in Waterford that they've been dominating with the jackboot on the neck would be wondering, how does this bloody crowd not win an All-Ireland?
Yeah, and I've played against Ballygunner and Munster Club on 3 occasions. I've always rated them highly. I think they're a very, very good side. But kind of coming back to what we were saying there a while ago about coaching, whatever, right? The sign of a team that's really well coached is when they don't revert to type when the pressure comes on. And when Ballygunner got that ball in around their own half back line, I mean, was there 3 or 4 10 to 15-yard passes before the space opened up. How many times over the years have we seen a team that are 2 points down, getting the ball, launching it into the edge of the square, in amongst a load of people, the ball falls.
And they were hairy passes as well, Shane. A couple of them were like, they weren't gimme passes. You were passing to a man who was marked, like it was utter trust.
It was, and this is what I mean. Performing under pressure is the best skill you can have, and that's why teams that train themselves under pressure generally come out on top. Now, I know there's an element of luck to it as well, but as I was watching the game, I thought, Ballystunner were leaving the thing behind them. But for a finish, what a goal from Harry Ruddles. I mean, I'd love to be Harry Ruddles yesterday morning and this morning and for the next 10 mornings. It's dreamland stuff. And I remember, obviously what you said there, Rory, when we won the All-Ireland Club in 2016, and thankfully we had a comprehensive enough win, and the buzz that we all got out of it and the club got out of it. So I can imagine, I see on Twitter there some videos going around of some of the celebrations, and if anything, it just gives you that drive inside you that you want to get your own club, back to try competing for counties and Munsters and so on as well. So it was an incredible game. A game like you look at you look at the Kilkenny Tipperary game, you look at the Ballygunner Ballyhale game, and it's very easy to know which one was had a lot more quality and a lot more physicality.
Right, lads, we'll leave it at that. Although, actually, Shane, I had one question to ask you. Sorry, I'm going back to the Wexford-Clare game. It's not a Wexford question. 4 points down, time pretty much up. Mark Rogers had a 21-yard free, which he tapped over, and then he looked kind of surprised at the ref. This happens every now and again. You were a free taker. Like, is there some logic to saying, we'll get a better chance at a goal than this 21-yard free, so I'll sort out the point here? Or is it just, it's a league game in February, he's not actually that bad? It just seemed like an odd thing to do, to tap it over and then look at the ref as if you're really surprised.
It's just hard scored, and no, it was different before, Mikey, where you could rise the ball at 21 and bring it in a bit. To score a 21-yard free now is very, very difficult. The reality is you still need 2 scores. So if you get one of the scores, well, then you just need one more play. And it's kind of, I suppose, maybe similar to Ballygunner. I know there was 2 points, not 3 points, but when you have it down to 1 score, you have a chance. But at 2 scores, you have no chance. So what would I do if I was in that position? Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You might get a better chance to get a goal, so you may have to take a punt and go for it. But listen, if it was me, I'd go for goal. But I can understand the psychology behind it. You do need 2 scores, and at least if you get one off the list, you have it down to 1. But it's 50-50 really. It's
like the debate over the rugby, whether they should have gone for the corner or gone for the post. Yeah. There you go. Happens in every sport. Listen, nice Monday morning chat, lads. I hope you have a very romantic Valentine's Day. Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Shane. And we'll catch up with you on Thursday for a football preview show. Goodbye.
From this, how much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy moly.